Hello and welcome to today's video. This time we'll be taking a look at Herman Melville's Moby Dick and how you can get the absolute maximum enjoyment out of reading this incredible book. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay, and so perhaps you might be among the many people who are just intimidated by the sheer size of Moby Dick. It's a huge, huge book, but I really don't want that to put you off. And in this video, I'm going to go through all the little tips and tricks that I used when I was first trying to attempt Moby Dick a few years back, and then ultimately how I got through it and how it's now become one of my all-time favourite novels. So, well, let's get started. Now, before you start, you might want to check out this video, The True Story of Moby Dick, which was originally produced for the Discovery Channel, and this was about 20 years ago, but someone has very helpfully uploaded this one to YouTube. In fact, it's been uploaded a few times. So there's various lengths of this one, and there's various qualities. So I've pinpointed the best sort of HD version for you to have a look at today. Now, what it does give you is historical information that will help you in visualizing things on board ship that you would read in this novel. So there's no plot points or story given away. There's no spoilers about the finished book. However, it does show the importance of the whole whaling industry, the living conditions on board a whaling ship, and the fate of the whale ship, the Essex. Now, the loss of the Essex was investigated by the Maritime Board at the time, and it received huge publicity, and Melville evidently saw this because he used this true account of the loss of the Essex as the basis for his epic novel. Now, one thing I would say is don't be put off by the sheer size of the book. Now, this is the Penguin First Edition, which we'll have a look at in a bit more detail in a minute. But this copy here is, well, it's just over 1,000 pages. However, the book is broken down into quite small chapters. In fact, there's 135 chapters in all. So it is very, very possible to consume Moby Dick in very, very short segments, which is exactly what I did. So if I found things a bit heavy going, I just gave it a rest, knowing that, you know, the chapters are actually quite small. They're just a few pages each as they work their way through the entire book. Now, since this is out of copyright, there are many editions that you can buy online or in your local bookshop. Ironically, when I was looking to really try Moby Dick, I downloaded a sample online for my Kindle, and that was another little tip that I read about online, which was to say, look, if you're put off by the physical book being so big, download the ebook, have it on your e-reader so you don't actually see the thickness of the book, which might be a little bit intimidating. But I downloaded the first 10% of the book for free off Amazon, and that particular edition was fantastic. It had illustrations and stuff, and it did make it very, very easy to read, and it was less than £2. So bear that in mind. But if you'd like a physical edition, and there are some beautiful ones out there, there really are, there are many that you can get online. So I would just recommend, because there's so many, have a little look at the reader reviews, see which ones are most popular, and see what people are saying about that particular edition. Because I've got this one, and I've got the Penguin Clothbound Classic one as well, which came out a couple of years ago. And, well, I've got thoughts on both, so we'll have a look at those in a minute. Okay, so here's the first of the two Penguin editions that I've got of Moby Dick, and this is published as a Penguin English Library. So the English Library for Penguin started in the late 1960s, and they were publishing books which weren't yet regarded as well, they weren't published as black classics. Even though the black classics were most definitely around at this point, this was like a separate sub-series, and they'd done a couple of other Melville titles, but yeah, it's just, this is a huge edition. It's 1,000 pages. This was the very first Penguin edition. There he is, Melville. And this is a really scarce book, believe it or not. I mean, I can't imagine it's worth a lot of money, but to me it is, because it's the first ever Penguin edition of one of my favourite books. Here we are. Look, it's first published as The Whale in 1851, published in the Penguin English Library in 1972. And there is a new introduction in this one by Harold Beaver, which was done specifically for this edition. And as you can see, before you actually get into the book, there's 93 pages of supplementary information, bibliographies, and the introduction, of course. And then at the end, there's a few references and maps and things like that. The thing is, reading such a huge paperback as you can see, it's not going to be the greatest experience. And come the end of it, I would imagine this book will be literally in pieces. This one is pretty nice with a rolled but unbroken spine, so I'm quite pleased to have that one. The edition I bought I think it was a couple of years ago, was this. This is a Penguin cloth-bound classic. These have got beautiful, unique covers designed by Bickford-Smith. And I've probably got a fair few of these in my collection. In fact, I have done a dedicated video. What slightly annoys me about these is that the actual text and the text block is literally lifted directly from the current Penguin Black Classic edition. So if we have a little look here, this edition, it says, was published 2013 and it's a 16th print. That is completely false. They haven't even updated it for the cloth-bound classics, which this one only came out at most 2 years ago. So it's literally the entire same text block, and I just don't think, apart from the covers, yes, it's better than reading that paperback. It's just not a nice edition. It's not been reset for this cloth-bound classic. It's like it's been knocked out almost on the cheap, and I really am annoyed by that. And they did exactly the same with Day of the Triffids, which includes, once again, I think, a subpar introduction. So this is a nice edition to have. It looks great on the shelf. It really, really does. But I, once again, am not a massive fan of it. There are some beautiful editions online. And I would recommend you do your little research to see if you can find one that comes well reviewed. I think Barnes & Noble did an absolutely beautiful hardback one with like a faux leather cover, which is illustrated. That might be one to track down, which isn't too expensive. Now, there is, of course, another way that you can actually get through this book, and that's to listen to one of the various audio versions. Now, there's a very, very good one, which is completely free. It's available online, and that was released through Plymouth University in 2013 as part of their Big Read campaign. Now, each of the 135 chapters is read by a different person, and it includes some big names who sort of helped towards it, such as Stephen Fry, Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys, Fiona Shaw, Will Self, Benedict Cumberbatch, China Melville, Tony Kushner, John Walters, Simon Callow, Sir David Attenborough, even former Prime Minister David Cameron. And Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Mary Oliver finishes off the whole project reading the epilogue. Now, if you are struggling a little bit with one or two of the more, shall we say, anatomical parts of this book, try listening rather than reading that particular chapter instead. And one chapter you would definitely want to check out is the one read by Sir David Attenborough, because that one is just incredible with his fantastic voice. It's like listening to like a Life on Earth. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, I mentioned there about the anatomical chapters, so it's worth mentioning that sometimes throughout this book, whole chapters are devoted to the capture and processing of the whales on board the ship. And it is true to say that not an ounce of the whales is wasted at all. Every little bit of the body is preserved and saved and barreled and cut down. And in all honesty, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So it could easily be too much for some people, and potentially these chapters could be completely skipped. I went through them, but in a few cases I was like, blimmin' heck, this is a bit OTT. So it may be that those particular chapters you may want to, rather than read, maybe just stick on that chapter with the audiobook and then move on to the next bit, which is perhaps more of the actual main story. Now, it's almost like there are two books woven into one, and this is likely due to a year of revisions and rewrites that Melville undertook. So two interventions seem to have prompted the rewrite. First, that he met Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now, Hawthorne was Melville's favourite living writer. He was actually 15 years his senior, and ultimately the book would be dedicated to Hawthorne by Melville. He also undertook a major study of the works of William Shakespeare, and reading these two writers helped Melville broaden his ambitions and hone his skills as a writer of tragedy. So if you feel like Moby Dick contains two books straining against one another, with the action story going missing on occasion, this year-long revision probably explains why. Now, ultimately, I think it's one of the best books I've ever read, and it is a true American classic. I would definitely recommend you try it, as it will leave a lasting impression on you for many years to come, which is exactly what it's done with me. Now, as a bit of background reading, I do recommend this one, Leviathan, by Philip Hoare. Now, Hoare was inspired to write this book back in 2009, I think it was, looking at the history of whales and their relationship with man over the last sort of few hundred years after reading Moby Dick. And it's really well illustrated and packed with facts. It's also quite shocking in places and quite sad to see how mankind has treated whales sort of over the centuries. Although it does mention lots of whales in popular culture, it fails to mention Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. So that's a sad sort of oversight on the book, but we'll have a look at that one right now. Now, here's a closer look at Leviathan, or The Whale, by Philip Hoare. This is, as I said, it's a great little book, but it's also quite sad. And when you read through it, it's just really well illustrated. This is just the sort of non-fiction book that I like to go through. And around this time, I think non-fiction was on a real high. There was loads that I bought and read around this time in the sort of early 2000s. And this was a great one. As I said, it really does. There's a few things in it which, is not very pleasant, a bit like Moby Dick itself, particularly when you think how endangered whales are nowadays. Really, they were just things of spectacle back in Victorian times. And it does have a more optimistic outlook, which is why I'm a little bit annoyed that it doesn't mention Star Trek IV, because that was very much, a Save the Whales film. It mentioned there how close they were to extinction at the time. And, well, there we are. But anyway, it's a really, really good look at whales, whaling, and the culture of whales in general. And I do really recommend tracking this one down. I said shortlisted for various non-fiction awards when it was published, and I very, very much enjoyed it. So links to all of these editions are going to be in the description down below. There is also an excellent website. In fact, there's a few of them, but this one in particular was the one which really helped me get through Moby Dick, and it's called How to Read Moby Dick. It's got lots of resources for you to dive into, illustrations and links and supporting documentation. And once again, everything that I've mentioned in today's video, including the audiobook from Plymouth University, will all be mentioned in the description down below. So there you go. I hope this video has inspired you to perhaps give Moby Dick a try. Bear in mind everything that I've said, the different resources. Don't make it a chore. This book is an absolute delight to read once you get into it, and it really is fantastic. And you will be very, very grateful when you make it to the end. You think, wow, that is really fantastic. The only other thing I've never mentioned so far is the many film and TV adaptations, and there's only one that I would really recommend. There's a pretty good Gregory Peck movie, but it just seems dated. That came out in, I think, 1957. However, in 2009, I think it was, Patrick Stewart of Star Trek fame, they did a TV movie, which is 2 1.5-hour movies. So it's 3 hours long. And for me, that was the best adaptation on screen that I've seen of this book. So if you're going to watch any of them, that's the one I would recommend. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this little look at how best to read Moby Dick for maximum enjoyment. If it has helped you, do please leave a comment below. Let me know what you actually thought of this fantastic book, because it is a fantastic book and I want as many people to enjoy it as possible. If you've enjoyed today's video, do please give it the thumbs up. Do please hit the subscribe button if you've not already for regular vintage paperback and book content, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.